Let's talk about Mozambique. For a while there, it was being praised as this model of post-conflict recovery, a real success story. But that's not what's happening today, not even close. So in this explainer, we're going to dig in and figure out why this supposed success story is trapped in such a devastating cycle of violence. To really get what's going on in Mozambique right now, you have to look here, at the northern province of Cabo Delgado. For years, a violent insurgency has been absolutely raging, forcing more than 700,000 people from their homes and creating a massive humanitarian crisis.
The human cost is just staggering. More than 3,000 people have been killed. And, for a lot of people watching from the outside, this explosion of violence seemed to just pop up out of nowhere. But the truth is, the seeds for this conflict were planted a long, long time ago.
And that really brings us to the big question we're tackling today, right? How does a nation that was praised as a post-conflict success story end up right back here? The answer isn't in today's headlines. Nope, it's buried deep in the layers of its history. So to start digging, we have to look at a history of, well, flawed peace. A series of broken promises, really. The key to the violence today is hiding in the peace agreements of the past, deals that were supposed to create lasting peace, but just never did.
Okay, so check out this pattern. In 1992, a huge peace accord ends a devastating civil war. There's hope, but then, bam, by 2013, the violence is back. So they sign another peace deal in 2014. Then, in 2017, the insurgency in Cabo Delgado explodes, even while another peace agreement gets signed in 2019. You see the pattern here? It's a fragile peace, an agreement between the powerful that just keeps shattering because it never fixed the real problems on the ground.
So why did these deals keep failing? Well, this quote right here, it absolutely nails it. The peace agreements were all about the political elites, the bigwigs at the top. They completely ignored the deep-rooted problems that everyday people were dealing with: poverty, injustice, and zero real reconciliation.
And this whole approach, it actually has a name: liberal peace. The theory sounds good on paper, right? You establish a democracy, you create a market economy, and boom, peace. But as our sources point out, in Mozambique, this just became a deal between the elites. It let the two main rivals basically carve up all the power and wealth for themselves, while the actual root causes of the war were just left to fester.
So who are these rival elites? To understand them, we've got to rewind the clock even further, back to the moment modern Mozambique was born, and this intense rivalry was forged.
Okay, picture this. 1975. After a brutal 10-year war, Mozambique finally wins its independence from Portugal. This should have been an incredible moment of hope for a new beginning. But that hope, well, it turned out to be tragically short-lived.
Almost immediately, the country was dominated by two opposing forces. On one side, you have Frelimo, the liberation movement that won independence and set up a Marxist-inspired government. On the other side, you've got Renamo, an anti-communist insurgency that was actually created and backed by neighboring white minority regimes to make sure the new socialist state would fail. This was never going to be a simple political disagreement. This was a recipe for a catastrophic civil war. And the civil war that followed, raging from 1977 to 1992, was just devastating. We're talking more than 1 million people killed, millions more were forced to flee their homes, the country was completely torn apart.
But a rivalry this bitter doesn't just appear out of thin air. You gotta ask, what were the historical fault lines already there that allowed a conflict this devastating to just erupt?
To find the ultimate root cause, we have to dig even deeper, all the way back to the very beginning of Mozambique's relationship with Europe. Yeah, we need to talk about the 500-year legacy of colonial rule. Before the Portuguese ever arrived, this region had a rich history of its own. It was home to hunter-gatherers, then later these sophisticated kingdoms that traded gold and ivory. But when the Portuguese showed up in the 1500s, everything changed. It kicked off 5 centuries of exploitation that would totally reshape the entire society.
See, the Portuguese colonial system was never designed to build a nation. It was designed to extract wealth. That meant exploiting resources and labor, crushing any kind of political dissent, and completely locking black Mozambicans out of the economy. It created these massive systemic inequalities. And a classic divide-and-rule tactic. They actively fueled rivalries between different ethnic groups to maintain control. These aren't just historical footnotes. These are the structural weaknesses that were literally baked into the country from the start.
Okay, so now let's connect all the dots. How does a 500-year-old colonial system lead directly to the insurgency we see today in Cabo Delgado? Well, it happens in a cycle, a really vicious one.
The cycle of conflict looks like this. First, colonialism creates this foundation of deep inequality and grievance. Second, after independence, that power vacuum is filled by a brutal civil war between rival elites. Third, the peace deals that follow are designed only for those elites, ignoring the needs of the population. And that leads right to the final step. All those unresolved grievances, the poverty, the marginalization, they just fester for years until they finally explode into new violence, just like we're seeing in Cabo Delgado.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that the insurgency in Cabo Delgado isn't some new or isolated problem. It is the predictable, tragic result of a historical cycle. It's the latest chapter in a story of marginalization and unresolved grievances that stretches back for centuries.
Which leaves us with one critical question. Now that we understand the root causes, can Mozambique's leaders finally take the real steps needed to address these deep-seated grievances? Can they finally break this devastating cycle for good? If you found this historical breakdown useful, you should definitely explore more explainers in our Quick Country Histories playlist. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Notebook Summaries for more deep dives into complex topics. Thanks for watching.